For those of you who don't know me, my name is Brecken Branstrator. I am the editor-in-chief of the Gem Guide, which is a role I'm fairly new to as of this year. Prior to that, I was at a trade publication called National Jeweler, where I was diving into the colored stone world for about 9 years. So I'm thrilled to be here with this panel today for what I'm sure is going to be a great conversation. So to kick things off, I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves to you all, talk a little bit about what they do and where it is they operate. You want to share? Mike, Stuart?
Sure. Right? Yeah. Okay. Morning, everyone. My name's Stuart. I run a business called 1948, based in the UK, and I supply traceable gemstones, mainly from Sri Lanka and through the Moyo Gems project, also from Tanzania.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Pauline Mundia. I'm the ambassador for Virtu Zambia. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Susan Wheeler. I'm wearing my Virtu Gem hat today. As all of you know, though, I did start out as a jewelry designer and am still, but now also am a co-founder and founding partner at Virtu Gem.
My name is Eric Braunwart, and I'm with Columbia Gem House. We work exclusively in colored stones. We started 47 years ago and started our traceability project 22 years ago. So that's what we do.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Ola Erogbogbo. I shuttle between Chicago and Nigeria. I co-own a business with my mom called Deinte Jewelry, and we design jewelry and have a retail business. And moved my business, part of my business, to Chicago and starting to incorporate gemstones and gold from Nigeria.
Great. So to give our audience an idea of what we mean when we talk about local source traders and examples of how it's done, walk me through how you all established these systems you've created and sort of what worked and what didn't along the way.
Wow, how long have you got? So, what was how do we set things up?
And how you sort of established your connections with your
Right. Okay. The simple answer, I suppose, is I just got on a plane and went to Sri Lanka. So I had some connections prior to that. It wasn't a completely cold visit, but it was very much about being out in the field and understanding the different scenarios, the different nuances of the local market, analyzing the supply chain, just as as we've heard from Anna's previous presentation, really just doing that legwork and that investigation yourself to understand the environment in which we were going to be operating. So that was the key thing for me at the outset. I'll let someone else speak.
I'll let you, Pauline. Well, we work in Zambia, Malawi, and Kenya, and the Virtu Gem story is really that we were unintentional. Does anyone call themselves a gemstone dealer anymore? But conduits for what we do. But we did start off in Zambia, and the way that we work with source countries is through Pauline and how we directly source. So maybe, Pauline, you should explain your role as ambassador.
Okay, thank you very much. But then I think most importantly, a lot of people might be wondering how I actually got connected to Susan. It was in 2019, I attended a conference in Kenya, and I was presenting a paper on women in gemstone marketing. And then there was a parallel conference in Kenya, and I think you were there, and they didn't have somebody to take up that role on that day. And then Monica quickly remembered me because we had met in Livingston in 2018, says, I know there's somebody who can do that role. And I was contacted. That's how I participated. So it was all about giving my experience. And that's how somehow Susan got interested, and then she asked if she could take a video, and then that's how the relationship started. In 2020, initially, Susan and Monica were supposed to have organized an exhibition called African Gemstone Exhibition, and to have taken place in Zambia, but then apparently COVID came in, and that was the peak of COVID in 2020. So Susan now decided to actually come up with a pilot project, since it was not possible for buyers to come and buy the stones, and also the miners to go out there to sell. So she introduced a new concept, which we believed it was a new concept, digital marketing. And she used the Federation of Small-Scale Mining Association to do that. And my president, who is a man, was actually the one that was in charge. But then, I'm not saying that because I want to say something negative about men, but usually men, they don't want to know, they're not interested in a simple beginning. They want something, with a bang. Because I remember that the first sale was actually 1 stone.
Gotta start somewhere.
Yeah, it started with 1 stone. And that was a citrine. And then now my president says, how could she just buy 1 stone? I was expecting her to buy so many stones, but then only 1. That's not the kind of business that I'm interested in. So I said, wow. Anyway, I said, I think, this simple beginning, would definitely grow, but he didn't see the sense. So I took over, because I've got so much passion for the gemstone, and also that connectivity, with the international market. So that's how now the whole thing started. And eventually now I came to realize that this was the mine to market concept. And the whole issue was about traceability, connecting the ASM and also the kata, because then eventually Susan was saying, this stone has to be taken to a kata. You have to cut right here in Zambia. And your job, Pauline, is to export. But then everything was actually remotely done because of COVID. So somehow Susan managed to locate a cutter. And then our job was to deliver the stone to the cutter. So when the stone was cut, it was brought back to us, and then we did the export. So that's how the whole thing started. Eventually, from very small or maybe very tiny beginning to what Virtu Gem is today.
Thank you. That was amazing.
Well, mine started out much like Stuart's did, except I'm much older than Stuart. So I first went to Tanzania and Kenya 45 years ago. So that's when the stones were first starting to come out of that area. And then across to India and Southeast Asia. And then in 2001, I took a leave from our company to do a World Bank project. It had some long title like Gemstones as a Method for Poverty Alleviation in Madagascar. I think that was it. And so when I came back from that, I had sort of a different perspective. So at that point is where we started working on the traceability and all of our protocols. So now, if a new supplier wants to sell to us, it's reasonably involved. Number one, I have to think there's a market for the material. And then we do interviews, much like Anna was talking about, to see what their positions are. Most of them will fail at that point because they go, why would you care about that? Well, if that's your first answer to me, I don't think we're going to get anywhere. If it's, well, we don't do that, but that sounds interesting, maybe we could partner with you on it, then we go further. So we have a vetting system now for new suppliers. currently, we do all the cutting for our company, and that was a specific reason too, and that was number one, if I just sent it to a general cutter out there, I didn't necessarily get what I wanted, which was a challenge. And number two, we developed a silicosis abatement system that I still think is probably the best in the industry. So we can be very confident there's no health issues at the cutting facility that we run. So that's what we do.
Thank you. I love all the unique stories. I would say I fell into it. You would think, oh, Ola's from Nigeria. She will be exposed to, what sauce gemstones meant. But I came from a world where my mom was in the jewelry business because she needed to feed us and she needed to take care of us. And then I took off and came to college in the US. And what I understood about the jewelry business was it was a way for her to take care of her family. But I quit my job at some point and went back to set up the business from ground up. She didn't have a store. She just used to go from house to house, friend to friend to sell. And she would travel to Italy and buy from Italy. So everything was coming from outside of Nigeria. So I joined her in the business. And for me, what really got me to start thinking about sourcing gemstones from source countries was because I wanted to make an impact, right? We connect with people, we learn from people. I wouldn't say there was anything that didn't work. I would say it was all a learning process. The first time I went out to go see if I could find sourced gemstones in Nigeria, I just asked around. I didn't go to the mines. That was something that was like outside of what I would ever do because of the stories you hear, the danger you hear, which might not be necessarily true. I've heard people ask me where I'm from, and I say Chicago, and they're like, wait, you don't have any bullet holes in you. I mean, that is not true for those that live in Chicago. Yes, there are parts of Chicago that you probably want to be, wary when you go to, or be careful, or go with somebody that understands that area. Same thing with Nigeria. So I think I asked around, and I think it was actually joining organizations like WJA that got me more sensitized to what that meant, what that would mean for the community that I'm sourcing from. And that was really what got me into wanting to source gemstones from source countries. And my first experience was going to a market that wasn't too far from where I live, and they would bring gemstones from Gombe. Jos is the regional place where they usually bring all those gemstones to, and then they would bring it to markets in bigger cities. And you would get to sort through, they would just like pour it out on the floor for you, and you get to sort through all those pieces. And I remember I brought some of those gemstones with me. Some were cut, because I didn't know any cutters at the time, to Chicago. I went down to Jewelers Row and was showing it around and speaking about pricing, and it was really priced out of the market. That was one of the things I realized. The cut stones, this particular supplier was taking it to Thailand to go cut it, and then bringing it back. But I'll stop there.
Thank you. So now that we've heard a little bit about the how, which I think more details will come out as we keep talking, let's talk about the why. And when you create a system that uses local source traders as sort of go-betweens, what that does for your business and the communities, and traceability, of course. So I want to direct this first question at Eric, Ola, and Stuart, and tell us a little bit about what benefits exactly does having a system with local source traders give you guys as designers, gemstone wholesalers?
We cut a lot of stones, maybe 30,000 stones a month. So we do work with some specific miners, and we keep those separate. But what we do find is, in many cases, we can't get enough volume from one source. So working with and the people that work as, we'll call them sourcing partners or brokers for us, they go through this same process. You know, we want to know their policies, their thoughts about the country they're working in. Do I think that if we're going to get information from them, am I comfortable that it's going to be straightforward and be what we need to get? And so some of these people in Brazil, you know, there's some great people in Brazil, so we're not just talking about Africa here. But some of them we've worked for many years, others are new. But, and I think Anna or somebody had a question for her when they said, well, you know, when you go to one of your suppliers and you start asking these questions and you run a risk of losing a supplier, is that a worry? We have to convince these brokers. We want as much information as possible. We want pictures of the locations. We want to know if there's projects we can help support. But we're not trying to go around you. We need you in that country because they're boots on the ground for us. Even though we go there, I cannot go there. We buy every 2 weeks. I cannot go there every 2 weeks. So those brokers are really a critical part for us, but we do vet them like we would other suppliers.
Yes, so for me, it was very much about having a supply chain that was fully transparent and traceable. And certainly at the time, this is going back 10 years or so, the only way that I could see to do that was to actually own the whole supply chain. And to do that in Sri Lanka, you have to partner with a local representative. And much like Eric just said, you know, we're not in the business of depriving people of their livelihoods. We want to work with them to enhance their livelihoods, hopefully. And so I was very fortunate to find a Sri Lankan business partner with whom I've set up a Sri Lankan registered company, and that runs our mining operations, our local network of traders, and our cutting workshop. And by having this full vertical integration, then that's the way that I can, you know, as we've mentioned earlier, in the absence of any really overarching industry accreditations or independent auditing that's feasible for a small business like mine, that's the way that I can then stand in front of my customers and guarantee the path that the gemstones have taken from the mine to them. And so the advantage for me is having that 100% guarantee of the journey of the gemstone.
Thank you. I truly believe like the story about the gemstone is as good as the gemstone that you're selling. It's really important. I think that's a huge benefit to me. Also inspiration for creating pieces. But on a big side, I'm all about impact. So being able to have impact in that community and weaving that into the story, I think, is a great benefit for my business. And obviously, the profit margin.
As for me, you know, when the pilot project was introduced in Zambia to source gemstones from the ASM, it was something that was very exciting. Why was it so exciting? Because in Zambia, like most of these African countries, they don't have any marketing mechanism, you know, for gemstones. No, it is trial and error. Whoever is available, you know, can be a buyer. So there is that kind of desperation. So you sell to whoever is available, regardless of whatever you are getting from there, as long as you are able to dispose of the gemstone. So when Susan came up on shore, I said, oh, my goodness, this is something that I've been looking for. So sourcing was not really an issue for Virtu Gem, because as I mentioned yesterday, that I've been in the sector for 33 years, to be precise. So I know who produces what. I know where it is mined from. So I would say it was a big plus for Virtu Gem. But then the only issue was the quality, which was a problem. Because for the market like the US, it is the fine gems. And initially, the program was to deal with women. But then most women do not have the capacity, to to develop their operations where the operations can be mechanized. And in certain cases, like the artisanal miners, whenever the good stone is found, the men always take advantage. The men will say, I know where the market is. Usually the women that they work with do not have the, the authority over the mine stones. So I thought this was something that was going to help women. But then it happened that few women had the fine stones that were required. So we ended up now engaging the traders. And these traders are people that have licenses. Because in Zambia, we have the Gemstone trading permit, which allows a Zambian, to trade in gemstones. And once you have got that license, you are also eligible to export. So it was very, 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 very simple to connect Virtu Gem to the artisanal miners. And after the first stone was sold, a lot more women came on board, and including the men. And then we used to use our office for the federation to do the pictures. I mentioned yesterday that the pictures was a problem. We didn't have the right phones. None of us had an iPhone. And then Susan will say, but can you redo it? Huh? No, you have to stand, you have to look for the lights, stand near the window. So we did what we could. But then later on, she decided to come up with a gem light, which actually improved the color, including the clarity, So we saw a situation whereby most stones were being bought. Then we are talking about traceability here. Traceability is not easy. Usually, people don't want to give out information like in Zambia. It was not easy for them to give out information because like in case of artisanal miners, they don't really see the need of paying tax. So they will always think that maybe you want to use that information against them so that you can give it to the government. But then they didn't realize that it was to their benefit. But then eventually, they really came to appreciate it, and they were free. And then with Virtu Gem, Susan would ask me to say, whoever wants to sell the stone, you should get a profile. They should give you just a brief profile about themselves and also their picture. So as we are sending the stone, there's also a profile and a picture of the seller. But then I would ask, but then, is that necessary? He said, yes, it is necessary because the buyers out here, they want to know who is selling the stone. They want to know just want to know the brief account of that person. I said, but for what? Also, it is going to add value. The story itself is good enough. And then she would say, when we sell, there is, what do you call that? The premium. The premium. Because I remember that time when there were no buyers and most of the operations actually had closed. So the premium, the first time, we got very good. The second sale, we got very good premium because I remember, I think it was something like maybe $500, something like that. It was very good premium. So we had to identify ASM who did not close their mines at that particular time. So we bought food stuff for the workers, just as a cushion to help them continue working.
Right. So it sounds like when we're talking upstream about the miners and the benefits to them, it's really finding a route to market for their stones, being able to tell their story, a safe pathway to get the stones to market. Is that right?
Yes.
Susan, did you have anything you wanted to add about that? Or?
No, I think that's great. I think that all of what we do is reliant on the relationships that we have with source country traders.
Right. So we all know also that when we're talking about all these different regions that they operate very differently, right? So you can't just walk into one and then a second one and assume that you can do the same thing. So keeping that in mind, what would you tell our audience about what they might need to know or learn when it comes to different ways that they're structured and potential differences about a place? And then with that, how that sort of changes your expectations for traceability.
Shall start. Speaking of Nigeria, I think yes, I think understanding that and I alluded to that and several other panelists, you cannot use a blanket standard across the board, right? I mentioned to you that my mom started in the jewelry business because she needed to feed her family and take care of her family, and that applies a lot to a lot of miners and brokers in Nigeria. So for me, understanding Nigeria, understanding the terrain is from research and also engaging with people. Just like when you start a job in corporate, which I can say that, or when you're selling to customers, you get to know them when they come into your store. You ask them certain questions that doesn't seem probing, but you're just having a conversation. It's like having coffee with someone and kind of figuring out what their values are, what's important to them, so you can see if you guys are aligned. So in Nigeria, there's not a lot of government participation. It's getting better, and then people don't own licenses, but not everybody does. They're family-owned mines. They're also, when you're looking to engage with miners, going through like the chief of localities is very important also. So I think for me, and even within Nigeria, there are also different, rules or things you need to understand about different parts of Nigeria, whether you're engaging in Gobe, where the mine is, or Zamfara, or you're engaging where they bring all these pieces to in Jos. What else do I want to add? I think that's pretty much it.
Okay, I guess I'll go next. We work in countries all over the world, so it's quite a different question. When people ask us, are the miners being paid a living wage, a fair wage? In the United States, in Australia, in Canada, you can ask those questions. We're not dealing in Afghanistan now, but the standard way there was a financier. He would put up the money for a group. There was a foreman. He would get, he was the lead guy that would go out, and then the team would mine. If they found something, they had a way of splitting up that money. They were not paid wages. In Madagascar now, where we're working in Ruby, it's a rice farming and apple orchard area. And when they're not working with their crops, as a village, they're out digging in this little area where they're finding ruby. So no, they're not paid a wage. That, it doesn't work that way. So many of the people that we end up working with are farmers, that this is a secondary thing. Some of the countries we're working in, like one of them, I just got the headline from the national paper, 91% unemployment in the country. They have nothing else to do. So they're just hoping they can hit something. So when we say, we have funded a number of things where we, the old term in the West, grub staked people, where we send money in ahead of time and just say, well, we hope it works out. But there is not one way. It's very clear in the States or in Australia. You get into some of these other areas, and there's a whole variety. So if somebody asks, are the people getting paid a fair wage, be a little bit more nuanced in that question. How are the people being paid, and is it fair? Because there are a lot of different ways that gemstones are produced. Sure.
That's a great point in terms of, fair wage, or, what are the things we're really concerned about when we're saying we want to know where this sourced gemstone is from. One of the things is like, okay, is it from a war-torn, zone? Is there a war? Is it financing terrorism or war? Is the miners? Do they have safety? Is there safety in terms of how they're mining? Also, are they getting a fair wage? And a fair wage, just like was just said, is different in different places, right? And I think for me also, I would say that being able, I mentioned that the government, there's a poor participation on the government side, and that's because there are other reliance in terms of GDP for Nigeria in particular, which is oil. But as we know how what is happening in the oil industry now, they're starting to look at other means of bringing in GDP to Nigeria. I would say that the other thing is being able to identify gaps that the government might not be helping with is crucial in terms of the Nigerian market anyways, right? Aside from paying somebody a fair wage. Because right at that moment, they're looking at feeding their family for that day. It's not like the money that they're making is supposed to last a month or a year. It's how do I feed my family? I'm desperate to feed my family today. So what can I get to feed my family today? It then leaves, and this is part of, I think, what the reasons why I want to know where it comes from is what are the gaps in that community and how can I help meet those gaps, meet people where they're at.
In Virtu Gem, we're working, as I said, in 3 countries, and the landscape in each country is very different for what we need and what we're looking for in supplying gemstones. The laws are different. So again, we rely on source trader, traders that live within the country. We know the laws and that they know the laws better than we do. They know how to export better than we do. And so we're relying on that. And also who the traders are already working with is kind of important as well. In Kenya, a lot of traders already have relationships with the gemstone trade here in the U.S. They have friends in AGTA. The cutting's very good. They already, they have a whole building there in Nairobi with cutters and traders. So it's very easy in Kenya for us to work with a lot of people that are experienced already. In Malawi, as we said, there's a shortage of cutters. The laws, were difficult to navigate. And so that's been, we have a fantastic team in Malawi. In Zambia, the laws are very good. We have Pauline that's familiar with them. But they're used to exporting a lot more rough to India and China. So the way that they were exporting, for us to come in and say we want to, like she said, sell a small cut citrine was like ridiculous if you're selling a lot of emeralds already in large quantities, or, you know. So I think that the way that each country worked was completely different each time we have made a relationship with a new country.
Yeah, I have this conversation fairly frequently with people who see through various channels what I've done with the business and come to me and say, conversation goes along the lines of, I have a connection with country X and we want to do what you're doing. And so my advice tends to go along the lines of several of the things we've just heard, really, is in each instance, you have to look at the country, the kind of the top level. You have to look at things like you mentioned the government involvement. You have to look at, is there a legal framework in place? How much there is already in terms of things like, you mentioned the export process. So again, that varies vastly. For example, in Sri Lanka, exporting rough is notoriously tricky. Whereas, as you've just said, from other countries, it's relatively straightforward because that's the default option because of maybe lack of cutting. And so, so I think very much you have to start with this top-level overview to understand the environment within which you're working. I think, for example, in Sri Lanka, gem mining, gem cutting, gem exporting, the whole gem trade has been ongoing for centuries, but certainly in a formalized sense, what we recognize as a formalized sense for decades. And so there's an interesting combination of the whole legal framework, the network of having to have licenses to mine, licenses to trade, licenses to export. All of that is in place. So actually conducting business in what we understand is in a legal way is right there. It's all ready for you. But also engaging with the miners and the cutters in a somewhat less formal context. As Eric was describing, that there are different systems in place where that determines how the miners are rewarded for mining and for what they find, and a lot of that is done less so with on a contractual basis, and much more on an understanding, because they've been mining there for such a long time and people understand their place within the system and the types of things, the responsibilities they have and the rewards they would expect for those responsibilities. If you compare that, for example, to the Moyo project in Tanzania, where a lot of the miners that we're working with are very new to mining. So, as Christina eloquently described yesterday in the presentation, there's a lot more activity there around setting up systems and educating the miners and working with them to develop the process. So it's a completely different environment. You could also, I think, looking at kind of the level down from the government, look at things like, mining associations that we have represented here in the room, and understanding what other industry bodies there might be that you can engage with to work more closely and work more efficiently with the communities. So there are these different levels before you even get down to the individuals and, as I was saying earlier, the business partners that you might develop within particular countries. So there's these different levels that need to be analysed, and they're very much they're different in each of the sourcing nations.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So much more to talk about, I'm sure, but I think we're running out of time. So maybe if we have a few quick, can we do a few quick audience questions?
Hi. Oh, is it on? It's on. Thank you so much. Hello, I'm Dr. Irina Baghdadi, and I'm a socioeconomist for the countries of Namibia, Lesotho, India, and the United States. But I have a question for, I believe, Eric, and I forget your name, I'm sorry, for the country of Tanzania, please, if you will. Yes. Stuart and Eric. So in 2010, Dr. Odemba wrote a dissertation on sub-Saharan African corruption. And I believe it was then that the tanzanite became very popular. So my question is, do you feel that tanzanite mining, cutting, polishing over the last 13 years has surpassed tourism and safari tours in Tanzania, which Tanzania, is known for having the most elite safari tours from a gross domestic product perspective? Has the Tanzanian gemstone industry, from a socioeconomic perspective, surpassed safari tours in Tanzania? Are you even able to answer that?
I can probably answer it without any statistic to back it up. I would doubt it. I think that the tourism industry is still bigger, but I think the idea is to try and grow more than one industry. So you're not just relying on tourism, or in Nigeria's case, just on oil, or in East Africa, just on gemstones. So it has grown significantly from when I first went there. I don't even think it was called tanzanite then. I think it was called tiffanyte. But so it's a huge change, and it is a big driver of income, but I doubt it's as big as tourism.
Oh, hi, Christina Mal here from Ethical Metalsmiths, and also I'm a goldsmith. So people like me, we're agonizing over the impact of people and planet when we buy a product. And sometimes, like if you go to Columbia Gem House website and some other websites, you can get a lot of information, which is extremely helpful and interesting. But oftentimes, it's a gemstone where it's very hard to get the country of origin. And then let's say someone is willing to share that with you. How does someone like me assess the comparatives from one country to another if I might read Behind the Bling, the Human Rights Watch report, which was really helpful. I can read some other white papers from different organizations, but what are some questions we can ask? And Stuart, you started answering my question before hearing it, looking at what kind of government involvement there is, what kind of mining associations, but is there any way that if someone says, I've got material from such and such country, but I don't know about that country, and Human Rights Watch didn't cover it in Behind the Bling, what are some questions I can bring to that gemstone dealer to try to assess their transparency and vet their claims relative to another?
I can start and then let somebody else continue. As you all know, I would start with, is somebody on the sanctions list? Is that country on the sanctions list? So that, to me, is the beginning one. And then I'll let everyone else answer, but I think that Ethical Metalsmiths Gemstone Supplier Group has mentioned that know where that gem came out of the ground, if you can trace where it came out of the ground. Because it's not, if you're talking about the full, is it benefication, is, whatever you're looking for in what you consider responsible, no child labor, et cetera. It can be from mine to mine, not just country to country.
It's hard because I know that we're all talking about knowing exactly where a stone is from. And one thing I understand is that sometimes those stones leave and come back. But how do I know that that stone that left Jos and went to Thailand and came back is actually the same stone? And a friend of mine, Kins, from Choice Gems, that told me that he deals a lot with brokers and miners in Gombe. He took a sapphire and had it tested at GIA. And he tested that it was from Thailand. Now, information you get is as good as the data that they have, right? Sometimes it's garbage in, garbage out, right? The system might be biased, right? Because what are we looking at? Trace elements and whatever else. So for me, yes, it's great to know. And I think it's really based on relationships, right? Having boots on the ground, people that you can trust. Having that relationship that you know that when this person is telling you that this stone was mined in Gombe, or where the mine is, they're giving you the best knowledge that they have, and you have the best intent. I would also say that the way I also think about it is, they say Google is your friend, right? Doing research about what's going on presently in the place. I think it was in 2012, there was some lead poisoning in Zamfara. So my concern at that time was, where's the gold coming from? I'm hoping it's not from Zamfara where that is happening, or where the Boko Haram war was going on in Borno, asking and making sure that that is not coming from there and funding terrorism. So I think really trying to figure out what is going on in that source country at the time, and gearing your question, not necessarily like, oh, is this from Zamfara? But having that relationship that you've built over time. And working with, to be honest with you, I don't only work with locals, I also work with people like Kins, and Mina gems, choice gems, because they've laid they have more of a structure process. It might not be as structured as a process that Virtu Gems has, or that Stuart has in Sri Lanka, or Eric has, but it's a process that, with the best intent, I'm doing the best that I can, which that is what all of us should be aiming for.
If I can just add on to what you have said, Ola. You know, every time when we talk about traceability, it is something that is complicated, but it's something that can be achieved. Why do I say so? You know, the journey of the gemstone from the source up to the market is not something that is really straightforward, because it can, a stone from Zambia would sometimes go to China, or it would go to India, or go to Thailand and end up here. But then the most important thing is the people that are actually responsible for that stone, they should say the truth. Because sometimes the information that we get is not the right information. There was a time, some time back, I think that was 2004, I attended a gemstone trade fair in Shenzhen in China. And then in that same hall, there was a lot of amethysts. And that amethyst, the one that was actually showcasing that amethyst was from South Africa. But then he was telling people that the amethyst is from South Africa, and yet there's no amethyst that is mined in South Africa. But then when I looked at the material, I realized that the material, some of it was actually from my mine. And then I inquired, this gentleman put a Chinese there, you know, to man the, what do you mean, the table, the stand. I asked him, I said, from where, which part of South Africa is this stone mined? He said, oh, I'm told that it's from South Africa. I made a bit of noise anyway. It was in China. And then people came to know the truth. I even appeared in their newspaper in China. So the following day, a lot of Chinese, when they read the story, came to the Zambian stand to look at this woman who looked to be huger than them and also get the story. I can assure you, the following day, that stand was closed. It was removed because the truth was revealed. So there are times whereby we don't get the right information. So we need to get the right information by dealing with the right people. See? Because some of the stones that come here, you know, because there are a lot of Indians that come to Zambia, they buy the emerald. So there are so many hands, the journey is quite long. What happens is that the stone will come from a mine, the miner will sell a stone to a local trader, somebody who has got a gemstone permit. That person who has got a gemstone permit will sell it to another local trader in Lusaka. And then that local trader now will sell that stone to a foreign trader, somebody who has come all the way from India. So that person who has come from India, when he arrives in India, will sell it to another broker. So maybe that broker now will sell it to a cutter, to somebody who is cutting. And then eventually now it will travel all the way to Tucson here. See, so in the process, somebody might not be able to tell the real origin of that stone. So by then now, I think in this meeting, said, how can we overcome that?
Perfect way to end that. Thank you so much. We're going to have to call it. We're out of time. We're running into the next session. Christina, is it okay if we continue this conversation offline? Thank you, everybody. Thank you, panelists. Appreciate that.